In this episode of the Toolbox, we'll talk about the coming war of the dynamic hosting sites, and then I'll show you several cool new tools, including Sandpack, Superbase, and Mitosis. Plus, I'll give you a demo of two small libraries, MD-Block from Liavaroo and Tippy.js. If you need to get caught up with the world of web development, then it's time for the Toolbox. Let's get started. Hello everyone, this is Remy Villalobos and I stream about front-end and full-stack tools Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific. So follow me and subscribe on all the social media things for more content. If you want to watch any of my past episodes, make sure you take a look at my blog, rabo.org. So I've noticed a lot of interesting things happening on the web recently, mainly that there are a couple of players working to dominate the dynamic hosting space. And I think that if I were to say to you, what do I think is going to happen next year? I think that we need to really take a look at both of these companies because they just got a lot of funding. They're flush with cash. They've been making a lot of moves lately. And I think it's really going to impact the direction of the web. So the two companies that I'm talking about, of course, are Netlify as well as Vercell. So let's take a look at what they've been up to. All right, so Netlify is a company that raised $105 million recently to transform the world of web development. And that is a sort of one of the hottest companies out there that has been making a lot of moves lately. And one of the companies that I've really enjoyed, they've really sort of transformed the way that people work with websites by integrating with things like GitHub super tightly and allowing you to deploy every single either commit or every single repository branch and let you test out where a stage of development is super easily. So they have moved on beyond that and they have added things like hosting and lots of other features. So if you take a look at this company, you'll know that it is built for scale. It's super easy to integrate into GitHub. And there's a lot of stuff going on, but what's really interesting is all of the moves that they've been making lately. So the website for this company is netlify.com. If you want to take a look at their sort of site, what's really interesting though is if you go into their blog, let's take a look and see if I have this. They recently made some interesting moves. So I thought I had a link here for their blogs. Yeah, let's go at the bottom of the page. They have this section called the blog. Just about every company has a blog. So if you look at some of the moves that they have been making lately is to start purchasing other companies. So for example, they just purchased this company called OneGraph. And, I haven't had a lot of time to look at this, but what it looks like is, taking the things that are difficult about the web, like a lot of the back end of the web is what people find really challenging. And if you can create less friction in that space, then you have something that allows people to focus on mostly the front end and mostly the functionality. So dealing, for example, with databases is really huge. So this is a company that sort of simplifies that process. They really, one of the things about Netlify is that they coined the term the Jamstack. So the Jamstack indicates sites that were pre-rendered using JavaScript, APIs, and Markdown. So that's the Jam, JavaScript, APIs, and Markdown. And basically, this is what used to be called serverless or pre-rendered or static sites until people realized that pre-rendering pages is really only part of the equation. So You know, a lot of people have been talking about flat file sites and all these things that make the web a lot faster, because on dynamic websites, even with things like GraphQL, the server has to do a ton of work to render somebody's page. And so what these sites have been trying to do is create an environment in which all the things that people see are pre-rendered. So when you go to a page, you'll get a page that's already sort of made just for you. The problem with that is that the world is really dynamic. And if you want to display, say, notifications, that's something that can be rendered, you know, pre-rendered. It's something that is perhaps happening right now. So say your replies when you're using like a commenting app. And for that, so what a lot of companies have been doing is creating a way to sort of connect to the back end of a server. And they call them different things. So they call them like server functions and other things, but it's the same thing. They have been trying to find ways of connecting to the back end. So Netlify recently, and they do this about once a year, they have a conference called the Jamstack Conf. They really are the company that has kind of owned the Jam, what they call the Jamstack, but it's really just pre-render pages, although other companies have done it, and I'll talk about another one in just a minute. Now, they started this conference a couple of years ago, and I went to the original one, and it's gotten better and better. Of course, this year it was just an online conference, so it wasn't as, I don't know, interesting to go to as when I first went. But they have, if you want to check out some of their videos, they're already up on the site, and it's just really interesting the things that they're doing besides just creating, you know, sort of a hosting sort of platform. And they had people like Rich Harris, so this is the creator of VELT, for example, and lots of other people. And if you want to, you can take a look at their site for some really good, you know, like different sessions and stuff. So you can click in here to watch the videos. I would highly recommend that you check it out because they really have some fantastic people talking here. I think the guy who invented Astro was also here. I think is partial hydration, making the static side interactive. Oh, with Peloton, so he's got a great. Is that a hat? Yeah. So check that out. Check some of these talks out. They're pretty cool. And stuff about Gatsby, anything that's really related to the Jamstack, I think it's something that they try to host. So one of the things that they announced is that they started a $10 million Jamstack Innovation Fund, as well as they took $1 million. So out of all that money that they got, they're taking $1 million and they are supporting open source projects directly. So Zach Leatherman, the creator of 11T, which is what Rabo.org is currently running, works for Netlify. I know they haven't made a lot of direct acquisitions as far as I can tell before. But so although 11T runs kind of as a parallel project, the person that works there, you know, who started 11T and who maintains it, works for Netlify. So that's pretty interesting. I've seen that move where a lot of companies are starting to own kind of a piece of the web. And it's weird because it's still an open source project, but it's sort of an open source project in the same way that React is an open source project and it's not officially owned by Facebook. But most of the developers or the core developers, a lot of them work for Facebook. So there's still a little bit of a tie. And I've seen that more and more as the web sort of struggles to figure out how to support some of the creators of some of these new features. So anyways, I think that's definitely a company to keep your eye in, Netlify, and these set of videos are definitely worth taking a look at. So the other company that I wanted to talk about is, of course, Vercell. Now, I'm a client of Vercell, actually, so I have a couple of domains that are owned by Vercell. Vercell used to be called Now, and I think this is probably the worst name change in the history of naming. They changed the name to Vercell, which I still don't know what it means. I guess it's generic enough that it doesn't mean anything. So you can tell recently they got $150 million to build the end-to-end platform for the modern web. So I think that the sort of targets are a little bit different, whereas I think Netlify is sort of supporting Jamstack a little bit more. Perhaps Vercell is looking to really create a very specific platform. And having said that, they created for some of the things that they have done in the past is they created this terminal that I love called Hyper, and you should definitely check it out. And it was also originally one of the fastest way to deploy Node.js projects. So that now terminal command that they created before they changed their name was, a way to deploy things super easily. So you essentially just set now in any project with like a package.json file, and it would just deploy it super easy. And I love that about it. Now they have actually thrown their support behind a lot of important open source libraries. So they support, for example, Webpack. They also support Astro, Babel, Parcel, lots of others. Now, notably, they have the most popular React open source meta framework, which is called NextJS. So I don't know if you've seen NextJS, but it is, again, it's an open source project, but I think that it is very tightly associated with Vercell, and most of the core developers are really working at Vercell. So that's kind of, I think, the thing that I'm seeing that is really different. A lot of these open source projects are being more closely associated with bigger companies. Same thing's happening at places like Microsoft anyways. So that's pretty cool. Now, so Next.js is sort of like a little bit like Gatsby in that it has a ton of features, and a new version of it just came out. So they just had their conference a few weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, and a new version of this came out. That really, I think, if you look at Next, although it's open source, it's really designed to play very well with their platform. I think they are looking more at creating a super compelling part of deploying websites. So a super compelling sort of company that has an engine that does the best job at building websites. You can see all the features here, super fast refresh. They do some really cool things with image optimizations. So they have an image component, and you essentially can ask it to load up an image, and it'll take care of building all of the images for different size browsers for you and optimizes and caches that experience. So this is, I think, where Next.js can sing that, because they I'm going to say own, but it's an open source project. Because they own kind of the experience, it's sort of like when you buy an Apple project and things kind of tend to work really well because they own the hardware and the software. I think that's maybe where Next.js is going with Vercell. However, one of the moves that they made recently is that they did have a conference, their own conference. So the CEO of Vercell is Guillermo Roche. Usually I see him at the GitHub Universe conference. This year, I didn't see him there. And so, I usually wonder, usually that guy has been on the GitHub Universe conference pretty consistently for a while. I didn't see him this year, and that's because they have their own conference now called NextConf. Whereas I think Netlify has Jamstack, which I think is a little bit more generic. NextConf is clearly, tailored to Next.js. They might change the name for this. So this is actually, if you want to know what they're up to, check out this website. So that is, let's see. So if you want to see, I'm going to put up a couple of URLs now. So if you want to see one graph, make sure that you take a look at that. And then let's see, I think I have a few things showing. So Netlify is currently showing. So let's see, the Jamstack. So one graph is that company that Netlify purchased, and then the Jamstack Conf is the conference that they had. And then here's the Vercell blog, and here is the URL for the NextJS conference. So you definitely take a look at. There's a lot of other videos that you can watch and hear, just like with the Jamstack. I think the difference is that you can tell that this conference is for Next.js. So it's very much tailored to how to use it with Vercell, and what its different features are. It's a really compelling platform. I would say it's probably the top React platform. If you're learning React, it probably would behoove you to learn Next.js, because it is kind of becoming the dominant platform for deploying sites using React. Very compelling. It's one of those things that I really want to learn. I actually tried running it. Somebody last week in the last episode, I actually asked what the people want me to do next, and somebody said NextJS. However, I tried it and I couldn't get it to work. So it is brand new and in beta. And so give it a shot. So I see a couple of people already here. Let me say hi to some of my peeps here. So let's see, how come I can't show this in here? Oh, that's because that's on the website. Just give me a second to pull up the comments section here. Let's see. Cool. So hello, Javier. Good to see you. I see Javier is here. What's up? Just doing my thing. Hello. So Peter actually has a lot of sites on Vercell, and some of them on Next.js, hot code reloading, auto routing, built-in CSS support. Yeah, it's trying to be a compelling platform, and I think that that's a really good thing. I'm always a little bit leery when companies kind of own the entire experience because things sort of get married to that company, but they're doing a great job, and I'm a client, so it's definitely one to look at. And if you look at the popularity of some of these frameworks, I think Next is really has become a compelling product. I don't know what Netlify is going to do because these two companies are very much pitted against once another. They're essentially hosting companies, but they're absorbing things that's going to make them more and more of a bigger player in the industry. So definitely, I think that next year we're going to see maybe things break out. So that's great. So NextConf, coincided with the latest Next.js release. Yes, and I tried it. I don't know if Peter, if you got it to work, but for some reason, when I tried it, it started giving me some installation errors, and then I couldn't get the hot reloading even to work. So I had to abandon. I'm like, okay, this just isn't working. Maybe it's just like the version that I'm trying to do, but I went through their installation and it just didn't work for me, the brand new version. So I'm going to give it a shot a little bit later and see if I can maybe bring up a tutorial of how to use it, because I'm pretty interested in it, but just couldn't get it going, or I would have done a little project with it. So somebody says, hello, a LinkedIn user. I'm not sure why. Sometimes people just come up as LinkedIn user. So, but hello, LinkedIn user. Go Ray, go. Hello, Ite. Good to see y'all. Yeah, good to see everybody coming to these. It's a lot of fun for me to do these. So in addition to NextConf, so they hired another, and I mentioned this last week. One of their latest moves is that Vercell hired the lead developer or the creator of VELT. I don't know if you use VELT, but it is a fantastic new framework. I call it like the fourth framework. So if you look at Angular, React, Vue.js, I think if you look at the popularity of frameworks, Svelte is sort of like the fourth one, and it's been trying to break through. The claim to fame of Svelte is that unlike things like React and Vue, there is no virtual DOM, and that is really weird because one of the sort of killer app features of things like React and Vue was the virtual DOM. But in reality, the virtual DOM, as it says right here, is pure overhead. When you are running things like React in the browser, all that, it has to consistently write and read from and create the virtual DOM. Now, it's really smart about how it does it. So the difference is that Svelte pre-renders your JavaScript. So it doesn't need to necessarily be sort of taxing the browser for updating the virtual DOM. A lot of these things are really obsessed with performance, but it is really fast. It's also really fun to use. I do have a course on Svelte, so you may want to try it out. It's I can't remember. It's like a first look course is showing you what the new features are. I really like it. I wish it was more popular, but because it hasn't been able to break through, not everybody's using it. I think that knowing that Vercell bought them makes me feel like I need to start covering it more and more, because I think that Vercell is going to do some compelling things and integrate it into their platform a lot better. The other problem with some of these companies sort of owning, quote unquote, I must say owning, but it's an open source project supported by a specific company, is that the projects will start becoming more and more siloed. So in the same way that React is kind of associated with Facebook, 11T kind of associated with Netlify, Astro, I'm not sure where it's going to go. I do like that it's agnostic, platform agnostic. But now, because Vercell, the gentleman that created Svelte is going to work. I'm sorry, yeah, the gentleman who created Svelte is going to work for Netlify. I mean, that just creates some stress. It just creates, I think, some stress that somebody's giving you a paycheck and you feel like, well, maybe I should work on the integration or work on some things that are special. So we'll see how it develops. But I really do think that Svelte has the potential to break out this next year. If it doesn't, then it's never going to, I give it 1 or 2 years at the most. It is a very good framework, super fun, very easy to write and learn. I like the way that it simplifies things. So when you write things, it does things like assume that you want it to load the framework. So you have a build tool that builds all these things. One of the things that I don't like about React is that you have to import React every time. And why do you have to do that? You already installed it. You have a build process. It should already know that. So it tends to be a little bit simpler. Notice that you just import a component like this. You don't have to import React, and the components are pretty easy to build. I enjoy using this framework a lot, and I think that they say that it was voted the most loved web framework with the most satisfied developers in a couple of industry surveys. I would have to agree. It's a lot of fun. It's simpler in the same way that I enjoyed when I first ran into Vue.js. It felt like, oh wow, I can immediately get this. I still like Vue, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. There's stuff is always moving around. So we'll have to really. I think that this could be a breakout year for Svelte, and we're gonna see, I think, serverless frameworks move towards more of a sort of hosted model. I mean, to me, the serverless idea never made a ton of sense because you still need a server. It's not truly serverless. The static pages, they just can't give you the interactivity that other projects can. And so one of the projects that we saw recently is this project called Remix. And Remix is really interesting. Let me turn off this layer here. So Remix, a very interesting project that takes all of the sort of ideas of the Jamstack and puts them all on the back end. I don't like it because there's something about having a little bit more control that feels better. But having moved my development to the cloud, I realized that the cloud is always superior until it goes down. Some of the companies are having problems with things going down all the time. But Remix focuses on putting everything on the server, which makes a lot of sense. Whenever I have to write a blog post on my website, I still have to re-render everything and then push everything to the server where it now builds all the pages on the server, which is being right now managed just by GitHub because it's a static site. So it makes more sense to just sort of have your local machines focus on content development and have the server handle all that messiness. Also, the way that a lot of companies are moving towards cloud development where people can just jump into code and then fix things with some of the tools like Visual Studio Code. That's a much better and compelling process. And I think that that's really going to start taking over next year. And we're going to see frameworks start moving towards a model that has more of a backend or a backend server component, because the backend can render the pages much faster. They can also cache everything onto CDNs much faster and make everything a lot better. Give you access to development quicker, so it can let you make changes. Perhaps there can even be ways to author a lot better. So I don't like some of the frameworks like Gatsby and even NextJS because creating things feels like you're working with JSX, and I'm not a fan of the JSX. Whereas things like 11T let you just immediately start focus on the writing, which is like what I like, the content development, which is what I like. You don't have to be a developer to create an article or to create like a web page. So this kind of stuff, I think for designers, this looks really weird, and it's not the best stuff to work with. It's not the most straightforward. So there's something about writing code in HTML and CSS. So there's probably a few more comments. Let's see. Actually, wow, so that's cool. Let's see, add to bracket. So Peter actually upgraded all his sites to the latest without any issues. Yeah, maybe it's a problem not with moving sites. I don't know what I did wrong. I mean, I tried it several times. Maybe it's not a problem with moving from one place to another, but it could be a problem just with the current, like the whatever the last version that they had a couple days ago. I just couldn't get it to work, so I don't know what it was. So let's see. Actually upgraded my site. So Astra, you mentioned Astra is agnostic. So yeah, you can actually with Astra you can actually combine React and or Vue pages in the same deployment, which is just really weird. I don't even know that anybody would want to do that, but I can imagine if I don't know why different departments might be working on different platforms, but it's really platform agnostic, so it doesn't care uh, what you publish in, and it's really interesting because like the way that you build the components, you just sort of call up the you just call up the components in whatever language, and it takes care of um, building them from it. So, but it's still Astro is still, I think it's an alpha. They just released a version like a week and a half ago. It looks amazing though. I think if you look at what projects people are looking at, Astro is really compelling because of that, framework agnostic sort of structure. I think that's pretty compelling. And that way you're not married to a specific platform. But again, like sometimes having an integrated platform like NextJS actually is going to produce better performance. So I think definitely something to watch. Yeah, you could totally make it out of either one, which is weird and maybe really cool. And today I'll show you something that's even weirder. So called Mitosis. So let's see. Add to Braca. So I decided not to do Svelte because no employers are looking for Svelte devs. Yeah, that's definitely a reason to stick with React. React definitely has sort of overpowered the industry, but I think it's showing some weaknesses here and there. I think that some of the things like what Remix Run is trying to do makes it makes something that is connected to a backend a little bit more compelling, and that's where Next.js comes in. It's sort of taking care of that. I'm building that on top of React. I think that this VELT process for creating a precompiled thing, and it just depends on how obsessed with performance you are. I would probably stick with React still if I was trying to find a job because of the same reason you're saying here. There's no employers are looking for Svelte devs. But again, the fact that Vercell bought them, I was pretty much ready to give up on Svelte. I mean, it's like sitting there in fourth place. If when people use it, they love it. But so we'll see what it does next year. I mean, and we'll see also what plans, Vercell, it's an amazing company. What they do with it, so they might have there might be a reason why they hired that developer. And Rich Harris was doing that on his spare time. I have no idea where he worked before, so just imagine what being able to focus allows him to do. Also, I think if they give him a team that is in charge of taking some of the concepts and moving them into like Next.js, I think that will be just really interesting. So I'm gonna wait and see what happens with that platform. I think it's kind of the one to watch to make a move next year. It's really well loved, so you can't argue with love and sort of simplicity and a compelling new feature, which I think the compiling is a compelling new feature. We'll see what happens. So cool. Cool video. Yeah, this is all simulcasting on like YouTube, Twitter, and other places because I'm using Restream right now, so you can catch this definitely later on LinkedIn and or YouTube. So yeah, far out. Super. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, awesome. Let's see. That would be very. Yeah, I think next year we're gonna see some interesting things happening on the front where you can see where things are going. That's kind of like what I try to do is figure out, okay, where is the future going? I think that you're seeing this kind of move towards. It's weird because we started with server side things, PHP, SQL, and others, and you saw the advantages. I mean, I clearly saw the advantages pre-rendering all your pages. Then you felt like, well, I really do. It would be nice to have some dynamic things. So you saw this sort of idea of server functions that go do things on the server and then return something back to your static pages. So the combination, and then Remix just like turned it all upside down and says, no, just put everything on the server. It's where the speed is where like the caching can happen, the CDNs can happen. They can do things like pre-render. Like they don't have to render the whole website. What if they only render pages that people need when they go to those pages, or render pieces of content? We have like hot module reloading, so you can do things like load most of a page that is pre-rendered and cached, and then get data. And the server is best suited for that kind of stuff. That stuff doesn't really belong in your local machine. And with the move towards cloud computing, I think that we're seeing a definite move, I think. And I'm pretty good at picking out patterns, if I may say so myself. So watch for that. I think that's going to be the hot thing coming up. All right, so let's see. Yes, very interesting and far out. So let's move on to some of the demos of some of these tools that I have. I usually try to bring you some tools. And the first one that I have is this very interesting tool. And I think it's a little self-serving. This is probably not for everyone, but I thought, wow, this would be really cool to have. So there's this site called Sandpack. And let's see. So the URL for that is just sandpack.codesandbox.io. And this is a component toolkit for creating live running code editing experiences using the power of a tool. So essentially it's for creating demos like this. And a lot of us have to do documentation for some of the projects that we're working on. So you can fire up a live coding environment very quickly. I am so going to look at this because I've gone from, when I do courses, I want people to be able to practice things. So I've gone on a journey from trying to build my own to a lot of these websites use something like called Cold Mirror. But this is a way to actually do that pretty quickly. And I do like this minimal sort of approach to let you look at the different files and the preview immediately. Yeah, this looks like essentially like a little framework to take care of these things. And if you look at some of the companies that are using this, you'll see that React is using this on their own websites, and it adds the ability to create, custom hooks. So I really love this idea. Could be useful for documentation. I don't know, like I don't know that everybody has this need, but I definitely do. And so if you look at React docs, they're using this. If you like the React documentation, they're using this as a way to sort of let people play on this little playground with the code itself. So I love this. I'm sorry if this isn't for you, but I thought, wow, this is pretty awesome. So there's a lot of companies here. You can see Code Sandbox, React, GitLab, and some other Storybook, which is another cool idea. So I will be definitely getting into this in the future. So what else do I have? All right, so here's another framework that I talked to you about called Mitosis. Now, this is probably the weirdest idea I have ever heard. So Mitosis is like a new framework that tries to sort of combine the ideas from a lot of other frameworks. So basically, it looks a lot like React. So if you take a look at, let's see, do they have any code over here? I mean, it's hard for me not to think of this as being a React-y sort of way with like return in JSX type code. Although one of the things I can't stand about React is the class name. So I really appreciate that you can just do class here. It's like a small thing, but it bothers me to have to think of like write something other than regular CSS or really HTML with proper classes and stuff like that. Now, where this thing is really cool is if you click on this builder here, you'll notice that you can actually take this framework and have it output to different other frameworks, which is very interesting, very weird. And you might be asking yourself, why would I ever even use this? Well, I mean, I think one of the concepts here is that if you're creating some components like in Storybook for your company, sometimes you have to create the components and make them work in different frameworks because different teams might be using different frameworks. So this essentially generates a language that lets you use a unified framework language that is similar to React with some major differences. Well, some basic differences. It's precompiled, and it'll compile to everything you need it to compile to. So super odd, but I thought that's an interesting idea. And when I saw it, I played around with it. It felt a lot like React, just that it has this really interesting idea. And of course, this is like early alpha. Please don't use this anywhere. Sounds like an edge case, but having like a single language takes the best of each of the frameworks and produces codes for all of them might be something that you are looking, to do in your work environment. Definitely, if you're into creating components that have to be supported in multiple platforms. So look at all the stuff. It even compiles to like Swift, which is crazy. Okay, so it compiles to VELT, Angular, Shopify, React, Vue. This is Solid. I don't know what this is. Builder, I think it is, which is they have like a visual code editor that actually that sort of fiddle thing that you saw, the Mitosis builder has like this visual editor that lets you go in and change the code by using an interface. It's kind of interesting, not necessarily something that I would want to use, but you can see the language here, pretty interesting and precompiled, and then yeah, so another interesting idea. Looks like it's a subset of JSX inspired by Solid. I haven't used Solid, so I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm sold into NextJS. So I don't think it outputs the NextJS. So I think Peter's saying is NextJS. No, but I mean they do support React. So I imagine that it might be something that you could output to. So I don't know if this Mitosis builder. You can click on React here. You can use style components, style JSX. I don't see specifically. So this is like a visual builder, and it's a separate project. So if you click on builder here, you can find out more about how you can use something like this to let people create essentially like a no-code site builder. They're cool, and I do like that. It's not just creating the page for you; it's actually giving you code that you can go in there and modify. But I've always really hosed websites when I try to use like no code tools, so I'm not really a huge fan. And I like programming. All right, next up is this UI library called ExtendUI. I've been looking for something that will take care of writing like tailwinds for me, or doing a better job of doing tailwinds. So I found this one called ExtendUI. What I like about it is that the animations are super nice and buttery soft, but it gives you a component language for creating animations. The animations get a little bit old, I think, after a while, but some people really like to have these sort of things. And essentially, this will work with Tailwinds and give you a language. One of the problems that people have with Tailwinds is that it really doesn't have a component language. So when you get something like Bootstrap, it comes with a lot of drop downs, popovers, tooltips. Tailwinds doesn't have any of that. So I've been looking for something that will take care of that, and I found this one. It looks pretty interesting, and it has just all the different kinds of components that I think you would want. So maybe I'll do a course on this at some point, or at least a video on this, because I want to use it. I want to find the one that I think is going to really be the killer one. That's really what I try to do. Figure out, okay, what do you think people are really going to start using? I haven't really found one. Perhaps Tailwinds will eventually figure out how to do that and give us something that is more than just the CSS part that has a component architecture built in. I would love that. Or I would love to find out one that's really compelling to add to your projects. So, ripple animation. So, I don't know what that means. So I guess, yeah, you could see the little animation when you click on things. Really cool. I mean, if you look at the technology that's behind this project, so let's see. Let's go back into the main website. What I like about it is that I like it when people agree with me. So if you look at the tech that they're using, they are using GSAP for the animation. And yeah, so GSAP, which is an amazing animation library for that animation, which is what I would use if I had the chance to use something. It's just really super fast and amazing. Tailwind CSS, again, I love this. Vanilla JS. One of the disappointing things is that it uses Tailwind 2, which, you know, it doesn't even use like Tailwind 2.1. I tried installing this and going through the process. The installation isn't, I mean, the instructions aren't particularly great yet, and I think it does need a better CLI. I mean, I'm complaining, but I don't have time to build these things. So if you look at how you install it, they're not showing you like a completed project. They're kind of going through the installations that you would have to do on top of something like VELT. So you would use this, add this to your project, and then you have to go through and create like a config file for post CSS. And this tells you that they're using like Tailwinds 2, not 2.1. 2.1 came out with the just-in-time compiler, which is a superior way of doing things. So this is still using the old way of creating creating projects with Tailwinds, which is fine, but I've already moved on. Version 3 of Tailwind is due to come out pretty soon. I was thinking by the end of the year. Now I'm sort of wondering it might still happen by the end of the year. But I'm looking for, if you got any ideas, I would love to hear if you're using something or if you really like something. I would love to hear what you guys are doing. I'm looking for something that pairs really well, like a good wine, something that pairs really well with Tailwinds. So yeah, yeah, I do love my CSS. Right, I just want to, I think like when you find something that works really well, uh, you just want to keep on using the thing that is easy to use. I can I can feel myself getting lazy at the thought of it. That's great. By the time I've worked out all their classes and whatnot, I'm not sure it's any easier than that. Yeah, that's true. But I think adding some of these components can get cumbersome. Uh, so I like that's why I a lot of times for projects I just go to Bootstrap because I know all the components, like you said, I know all the classes, I know everything, and I can just get things done. With Tailwind, sometimes I know that I want to have like a carousel or a drop down, and it's like, oh, I have to build that or find something that works with it. So I think that the right sort of environment hasn't been created yet. I'm looking forward to finding out about it. Like I said, this one felt like it's a good idea, looks great, not quite 100% where I need it to be, but they're using the right technologies. So if they just upgrade this to work with, say Tailwind 3, and they make the maybe make a better CLI or have better instructions, then it could be a really compelling one. Also, it does have support for React, but I don't see support for anything else. So that's another thing to worry about. All right, so this is sort of an interesting, fun thing, not necessarily extremely useful. So this is a Chrome extension called 30 Seconds of Knowledge. And this essentially lets you, whenever you create a new tab, so let me just make a new tab, it shows you an interview question. So I don't know, sometimes it's fun to like have it just give you different. So I just did a refreshed and it gave me another CSS sort of idea on how to use something. So it's pretty cool. It gives you a demo, which you can play with on CodePen. And you can configure this. So this is pretty cool. So I installed this. That's why you're seeing it. And I should give you the URL for this. So let's go. This is 30 seconds of knowledge.com. So you can see that you can turn off things that you don't want. Like I turned off C++. It's been a while since I used C at all. turned off PHP and Python and Ruby, and just, I don't even know what Lambda is. I should turn that off. And yeah, so you can sort of define the things that you want and then hit save. Also, I had to make the font size bigger. I'm not necessarily going blind, but I don't like small fonts. So now if I hit the tab, you'll see like another cool little tip and idea. I think they say they have about 900 ideas. So interesting. I'm a big sucker for things like this that give you a way of making every time you open up a tab have a different experience. So anyways, so check that out if you're into that. Let's see, what did I, so it looks like I need to see my tabs, get out of full screen and get to the right place. So the next thing, all right, so I don't know if anybody has experience running this platform called Superbase. When I saw that this was a Firebase alternative, I'm like, this is awesome. The concept here is that it's an open source alternative to Firebase. Firebase from Google now started up as a project, and so Firebase is like a NoSQL database that it's real time, provides like features that built in that are difficult for people to create. So it's real time features. You can have multiple users modifying the database at the same time, and you don't have to worry about collusion. It handles that for you. It handles what happens when somebody on a mobile phone goes offline for like a few minutes. It handles those issues that would happen if somebody updates a record in your database, but they've done it while they're offline. It handles the fact that they just went offline, so it caches some of the data. And then it also will automatically, as soon as they come back into a connection, it'll automatically manage that collusion and do the updates that it needs to do. It is so amazing that I love it. I love working on it. A few years ago, Google bought it, and like a lot of things that Google does, they really have improved it. However, so when I saw, oh, this is a Firebase alternative, so create a backend in less than 2 minutes. So what these people are doing is something that makes the back end, as I mentioned, the back end part of working with databases a lot easier. So things like that, I'm not sure if it handles offline, but handling that part where you need to manage multiple users hitting the database, it does that for you. So I was drooling over this thing, and then I tried using it. And I realized that it is a PostgreSQL database, but it does have, okay, so another thing that Firebase will manage for you is authentication. So it has multiple authentication protocols that let you hook to things like, of course, Google or email or, a link, that new sort of procedure where it sends you a confirmation link, two-factor authentication type stuff. Like it manages all that, so that's pretty cool. Instant API, so it does have real-time feature, subscriptions, and storage. If you look at Firebase, though, it's a lot bigger than, let's see, Firebase. If you've never used Firebase, I mean, I've never fallen in love with a, I don't know if this is the right website, but I just think that it's unbelievably awesome. And they do a lot of things now, multi-platform, not just for the web, but also for iOS and Android. And they do things like provide analytics for you. So you can get app analytics as well as, analytics, of course, for the web. And it's just like super easy to do things like read and write. It's a joy to use. This thing is ridiculously cool. So if you've never used it, maybe try it out. I have a couple of courses on it. It's hard for me to go to something else. The big advantage of something like Soupabase is that it's open source, but I'm not sure that I want something like that to be open source. Like I'm not sure that I want, and the thing that I like about Firebase is that it just takes care of things for you. I'm not sure that it would be as good if I had to worry about, updating and keeping things maintained. So that's why I love it so much, though. But there it is. All right, next up, I have something from, there's not a lot of people that I would call geniuses, but Leah Veru happens to be one of them. So this is a new project that she create it. And she creates new projects all the time when she has, I guess, free time. And if you read a little bit about the history of how this particular project came into being, you'll find that she talks about something called yak shaving. And it's the process of when you're trying to do something, but then you realize that in order to do that, you need to do something else. And then you end up going, this happens to me all the time. But her something else is building these little frameworks. Essentially what it does is let you render Markdown in your HTML by using a tag. So what you do is you add a module, and it gives you this new MD block or MD span tags, and then you can add just any Markdown in there pretty easily. So I do have a demo that I did, and I don't have a ton of time, so I'm just going to show you kind of how it works. So, and this is of course a code swing. Let me put the URL to this. So you can go to the MD block project at this URL, and if you want to see what I'm working on is a code swing that is on GitHub. I created a short link because the link is really big, but you can see how you essentially create this new MD block tag. And in that MD block tag, you can write any Markdown. Now, I love writing Markdown. This is definitely not something that Morten would enjoy, because Morten, my friend that works at LinkedIn Learning as well, he's not a big fan of the Markdown. I love Markdown. I hate writing like HTML. I'm not a fan anymore, so I just want to do things in Markdown all the time. And you can configure this to use syntax highlighting. So you can see here. Another thing that Leah Veru wrote is her own syntax highlighting library called Prism. So you can very easily integrate it into the project. And if you look at the code swing, all I've done here is imported this library called MD block. And since I wanted to support Prism, I had to import Prism as well as a CSS file for Prism, so that it knows how to style the code block. But I didn't need to do that, and I threw Bootstrap in there just so that it doesn't look super ugly. So you can see that it's fairly easy to implement, and it does just let you write Markdown anywhere. The other interesting thing that it does is it does allow you to create either inline Markdown or external. So you can actually use this to load up some external Markdown and put it into your project. So she needed it for something else she was doing, and so she just went down this rabbit hole. So there's an interesting article. I think if you go to her blog, let's see, blog, or maybe it's something. Yeah, I wanted a few more things. Somewhere there's an article in her blog about how she went down the rabbit hole to create this. I guess if you go to Leah Veru, yeah, so yak shaving, she calls it. You start doing one thing, and before you know it, you have, I guess, shaved the whole yak. So yeah, what's Friday afternoon? Wow, it's already. She's like, it's the kind of thing that happens to me all the time. You think, oh, I need to build this tiny thing, and it's just going to take me like 30 minutes. And then like a week later, you're still finishing it up. So yeah, really cool little project. And if you want to play around it, check out this code swing. I mean, it's super easy, and you can include it fairly easily. And there's additional properties that you can add to these MD blocks. All right, finally, and it looks like I'm doing pretty good on time. I have a few more minutes. So I really am a sucker for these sort of libraries that do utility things. I'm always like, what if I don't have Bootstrap, or I can't use Bootstrap? Like, how do I do drop downs and components? Just like I mentioned before, I haven't found the perfect thing. So this is a simple library called Tippy.js, and Tippy just lets you create all kinds of tooltips. So this is odd because it sits on top of Popper. So if you know, Popper is the library that Bootstrap uses to handle its drop downs and its tooltips and its popovers. So this is also using Popper. The problem with Popper is that it's really just a what do you call it? It's just really a positioning framework. So it doesn't have all of the features that something like this would have. Yeah, and so I also created a code swing to just kind of show you how it works. I don't have a ton of time, but essentially, and this is still a code swing. So if you go to, let me pull up the URL here. So the place that you can go check out Tippy is this right here. And if you want to play around with this repo in code swing, so you have to have code swing installed to see this sort of code pentalics type experience, but you could just go to, here's the longer version of the URL. But I have like if the links get a little bit too long, I like to just give you a short one. So you can use that. Let's see. So there is a little bit of setup. If you look at the codeswing.json, you do have to import Popper as well as Tippy. So you would do it like this. This is like a script tag, but you would just point it to those things. And then you can also, I also, of course, imported Bootstrap. Again, I don't like how the browsers look without, some basic styling. So I usually toss that in there. And then you can add additional sub-libraries. So this is optional. This is optional. You would just have to include a couple script tags for this. And then you get all the power of the framework. So basically what you have to do here is you do have to have a script tag, and the script tag has to initialize it, really just like with Bootstrap. You say like Tippy, and then you ask what you want to target here. So here you would say something like BTN, right? So you're saying, I want to target all the items with the class of buttons. Let me go ahead and hide this, right? Once you do that, you can also pass a configuration object. So if you wanted to say target just this particular button, this top one right here, then you could just add in an ID here of my button. If you wanted to control all the buttons, then you just use something more generic like BTN. And then in here, you would add a configuration object if you want to control things. So the number one thing that you would probably want to add is content. What do you want the button to say? And you could just add something like this, my tooltip. And let's see, I need to make sure that I save these things. And hopefully this will work. Of course, things aren't working. So Tippy, let's see, TP, and then target the button. No, I need to make sure that I add a comma here. Why am I always trying to do live coding things? I have no idea. Of course, now the buttons say the same things. That's not cool. But you can, another way that you can configure, anytime you see configuration methods in this JavaScript, you can do the same thing with that data attributes. So say for the second button, what you can do is just use data attributes. So say you can say data Tippy content, and then just put whatever you want, hello. And now the second button behaves like the other one, but it says something different, right? This one still says my tooltip. So so you would definitely probably want to put the content as a data attribute, but then kind of initialize defaults here, and then you can add additional configurations with this data attribute. And there's a ton of different data attributes that you can add. And again, you can do them with either the JavaScript initialization, or you can do it with data attributes. So you can say placement, for example, and say bottom. So now the placement by default is at the bottom, or you can go in there and say data Tippy placement top now. So now this one should be at the top and this one will be at the bottom, right? And lots of other specs. So duration. So you can slow down the speed at which it draws the item. So you could see that it kind of takes a little bit more time. Maybe I should make this like a lot. See, like it takes a little longer to draw in and out. You can turn off the arrows, for example. Oops, arrows, false, right? So now it doesn't have any arrows, or maybe it does, or I need to save it. So actually, it's just arrow. See? So now it doesn't have an arrow. You can also create custom styles if you want to for the colors, if you want the colors to look a little different. It's a little bit odd. You have to do like a Tippy, oops, not Tiffy, Tippy dash box. And then you have to target the data attribute, data theme. And here's a weird one. Instead of an equal sign, you have to use a tilde equal sign. I wanted to say that to you because When I do a tilde equal, the font that I have gives you that funky one, but it's essentially a tilde, which is the ñ that we use in Spanish, with plus an equal sign. And then you get this, and then you can call this thing something orange, right? And then in here, you would do background color orange, right? And now you can use this as a theme here, and we'll set it as the default theme, not theme, and then use the orange theme. You can actually, it does have a couple of themes, but this is an easier way to create this. If you do have the arrows, it's a little bit more of a pain. So if I take that down, the arrow is black. So when you have the arrows, you have to have a lot more of these type of styles, and you can look at the docs to create the versions of the top, right, down, left arrow for your style sheets. It's a little bit harder to create a theme for all the different sides of the arrows, but still pretty cool. I mean, I like these kind of little utility frameworks, and I do have a version of this. So if you just go to this repo, so if you go to github.com/swingtippy here, you can hit, from any repo now, if you hit the period, you'll jump into that environment that I was just showing you. There are a couple of branches here. So if you go to Target, it has sort of a fancier, quote unquote, finished version of what I was trying to show you here today. And it just gives you a lot more sort of properties here. So this is a little bit more fancy. It has you can control the delays, you can control the animation, and when you have these different animations that you use, so notice that the tooltip kind of slides in and out from the center right now when you roll over it. To do this, you do have to make sure that you import a slightly different animation sort of sequence. By default, it'll just fade in and out. So there's a few animations that it comes with, and you just add another piece of CSS if you want a different animation than the default fade in and out. So I think we're going to make it on time. I have a meeting coming up, so it looks like I need to go to my meeting. So good seeing you again. This is going to be the last toolbox for the year. There's a lot of really cool things happening. People at work have noticed the toolbox and they love it. So mountains are moving, seas are parting, and you might see the toolbox get a little bit bigger next year. So I'm debating how often to do these. I think I can really, when I get into course development, I can probably really do this only every other week. So I might switch to that model, or some model where I do 1 week where I do more of a Q&A thing, and then the next week I do like a regular demo, and that way I can prepare a little bit better for the demos. Yeah, who knows what'll happen next year. I'm looking forward to big things. That's what some of the meetings that I'm going to be having later on today are about. So really good to see you. If I don't see you again, I mean, I'm always on LinkedIn. So other than that, have a Merry Christmas, a prosperous New Year's, and just keep tooling. Take care.